This isn't a film that's scary like Hereditary is. It's not even as scary as The Witch, I wouldn't say, or Midsommar. It's just a bit unsettling. That's what it is. It's unsettling and it's quite tense in places. But it doesn't really go bump in the night like other films do. Sam's cup of tea. Sam's cup of tea. Hello and welcome back to Sam's Cup of Tea, and today I'm going to be talking about Saint Maud, the latest thriller horror movie from the studio A24, directed by Rose Glass, and this has been one I've been really excited to see. But before that, I just want to briefly talk about A24. I have loved A24's string of movies that they've released. They seem to have elevated the horror thriller genre out of all the nonsense that we've had the past sort of 10-15 years with, typical Hollywood movies like The Conjuring and all these other ones that are just these ghost stories that are always begin with, this story is based on true events, but blah, blah, blah. And people say, it's right. I hate all that. And A24, they've avoided all that, and they've given directors their own sort of independent movie and a decent budget to make their own vision. And it's just been fantastic, the results. I loved Hereditary and Midsommar and The Witch. A lot of these films are great, and they really do feel more like independent movies than the sort of stuff we get with Hollywood. Genuinely unexpected things happen and odd, and sometimes people don't like them. They alienate certain parts of the audience, but I like that. I think you need that in horror and thriller. You need unique visions. That's what we're all there for. So Saint Maud is the latest in this string of A24 movies, and it was teased last year. It was released last year, actually, around, I think, in America and England, but I'm in Korea, didn't get to see it, couldn't find it anywhere online, but the trailer was just absolutely mesmerizing, and I couldn't wait to see it. I've really enjoyed a lot of the A24 movies, as I said, and I just couldn't wait for this. It looked unique, it looked interesting. So Saint Maud is directed by Rose Glass, a female director, who I'm not really acquainted with her work. I think she's kind of up and coming, but judging on this film, I'm really excited to see what she's going to do next. It stars Morphy Clark as Maud, the main character. She is basically a nurse, a practitioner nurse, young, who is very religious and has gone through some kind of breakdown before the film starts, and it kind of goes from there. And then we have Jennifer Ale, who is also in it a lot, who's this dancer. She's the former dancer that she looks after, who's got, I think, spinal cancer or some kind of cancer. And there really aren't many people in this movie. It's not like a big ensemble cast. It's more of a character study. So the basis of the story, it takes place in an undisclosed sort of British seaside town. And having hailed from a seaside town myself, Cleethorpes or Grimsby, for anybody who knows England or is English, I'm quite accustomed to that for dreary sort of a seaside town aesthetic, and it does that really well in this. I'm not quite sure where it was filmed. I'm not sure if it was Brighton. I don't think it was Brighton. But anyway, it takes place there, and the movie kind of begins when she gets a new patient to look after, and that is Jennifer Ale. And she goes round, and Jennifer Ale is quite obviously rich, and she's fallen on hard times, and she's basically dying from a terminal illness. She used to be a very affluent dancer with loads of contacts, American, and we don't really know why she is in this undisclosed British town. Why is she here? She's American. It's never quite explained. But the crux of the movie is basically about Maud and her psychological journey throughout the film. So we know very early on that she's very religious, but she's also very lonely. And what I would compare this film to, if I had any comparison, is basically the recent Joker or Taxi Driver, which that was based on. I haven't heard people compare it to that much, but I really felt there was big parallels towards it. Just like Taxi Driver and the Joker, it focuses on a character study of somebody who's on the fringe of society, somebody who is lonely, who is suffering delusion, and the events that take place in the film, their interactions with the outside world just push them ever further away from that and ever closer to the brink of sort of insanity in a way. What's interesting about Maud is that Saint Maud is that there's a sort of religious framework to it. So she kind of is pushed towards it, and I think we can all relate to that in the sense of we all know somebody who might have had a sort of mental breakdown in their life. It's quite a common occurrence where somebody has a mental breakdown and they find religion. Unlike things like the Joker and Taxi Driver, where they become psychopathic killers or they become basically criminals, the sort of through line for Saint Maud is a lot more relatable. Not actually what happens, because it does get pretty mental, but the idea of, you know, people usually find the framework of religion and God due to a sort of traumatic relationship with the world, traumatic event, and they sort of cling to it when they're at the lowest. And that's basically what we see with Maud. We never really find out what the catalyst was for some kind of breakdown, but we get the sense that just before the movie starts, she went through something awful. And the people that Maud meets throughout the movie, the few people, they do make sort of reference to that. And so, yeah, it's a very intimate portrayal of her, and she's basically looking after Jennifer Ailes' character, and very quickly her aim goes from just looking after this person to thinking that she can save her, basically salvation. She feels that it's her duty, it gives her meaning, it gives her purpose, it connects to the religious aspect of how she's feeling. And it's just a great movie. It's a very small movie, it's not very long, it's not epic in any way, it's very sort of small and contained, but I like it for that. I really appreciate it for that. It never quite flies the nest of just, you know, utter over the top, everything goes it always stays on her. And what's brilliant about it is, first, Morphy Clark's performance is fantastic. She is a soon-to-be breakout star. I haven't seen her in much, actually, but I can see her now becoming a really big star because she is fantastic in this film. She plays the sort of vulnerability but also conviction in what she's seeing, this desperation, amazingly throughout the movie. It's so sort of relatable, but in the extreme cases, which is why, you know, movies like The Joker and Taxi Driver resonated with people as well. It really taps into that sort of what it feels like to be on the fringes of society. And what's amazing about it is that the way it's directed and the way the narrative goes, it fluctuates between delusion and reality. And so it's not always clear what is really happening and what isn't happening, but there are some times when you get the sense that there is a real dissonance between what is really going on and what's going on inside Maud's head. And Morphy Clark does a great job of that because it's more subtle than other movies make it out to be. Because nothing really crazy happens until right near the end. So it's sort of like, as you go through the movie, it's more of this psychological battle and her interplay between interacting with the world. And, you know, it's really interesting. It's really, really interesting. Jennifer Ailes, fantastic as well, because she plays this sort of, you're not quite sure where Jennifer Ailes sits on things. You know, does she sort of believe in God like her, or is she going to be turned around? What does she sort of think of Maud? Does she pity her? Does she genuinely like her? Does she, you know what I mean? There's sort of a contentious atmosphere between their dynamics, and that's basically the whole movie. There are other people that come into the movie, but they're very fringe characters. There are moments where she lapses in terms of like a normal, ordinary person. She starts out this squeaky clean person, and then there's a part where something bad sort of happens and she sort of lapses back to sort of move away from the religion and grasps for something more materially available, you know, goes out and tries to interact with people and tries to feel something physically. And that desperation is something I'm sure we've all felt, you know, that there's always this kind of interplay between wanting to appeal to our spiritual, you know, our spiritual goals of being sort of enlightened and being content with things the way they are, and having like highfalutin goals of being a better person and being moral and being all these things. But then we also have this like deeper sort of undercurrent of desperation, and always a feeling that you can go there, and that lapse that we've all had where we've gone on a binge night, or we've gone and done something very hedonistic, and then you wake up with a hangover and you think, why did I do that? You know, I was on such a good roll. We all have it. You know, we have it in our daily lives where we say, I'm going to eat healthily for this month. I'm going to go to the gym every day. And you have this highfalutin goal. That's where you can kind of resonate with Maud, where you feel like that's her religion. She's ascending to that, and she's found some refuge in it, which doesn't rely on other people around her. In her head, the delusion is, oh, you know, I'm this brilliant messenger from God. But then it moves from just contained in her head to starting to want to affect the outside world. It's our own expectations of the world versus reality. And what reality does is it just slaps our expectations right in the face. And that's sort of what Jennifer Ahl's character does. She's not as easily molded as Maud wants it to be. And that's a sort of... So it's weird because even though the movie is quite small, but it represents something a lot bigger, which is that, you know, loneliness and that sort of drive to the fringes of reality is that failure to recognize that you have to make some kind of compromise between what you want, what your expectations, and what really is happening. And the dynamic between Maud and Jennifer Ahle perfectly represent that, because you've got Maud on the one hand, who has this absolute idealist idea of I'm religious, I'm going to do this, and I'm going to save this person. This is my mission. And Jennifer Ahle sort of represents reality. She's dying. She has an inevitability to her. She's sort of got a resignation about it, a fatalistic attitude, and she has a very sort of attitude of, you know, this is the way it is. You know, I mean, you got to enjoy life before you know, and it's brilliant to see, but it doesn't quite hit the highs of other films I've seen in this sort of genre. I wouldn't say it goes quite to the heights of the Joker, let's say. I'd say that I enjoyed the Joker more, but Saint Maud is a subtler, if you could say that, a subtler film than the Joker. And the Joker was, you know, quite subtle in places, but I think that some people would prefer this. Now again, with this movie, like a lot of the A24 movies, there seems to be a bit of a disparity between the critical reception and the sort of audience reception generally. And the critical reception last year was so good for this movie. It was just like, this is one of the best movies ever. And the audience reaction is a bit more mixed. It's not terrible, but it's just a bit more mixed, where there's a few people saying, I expected this to be a horror movie. It's not that scary. And I can sort of understand both sides. This isn't a film that's scary like Hereditary is. It's not even as scary as The Witch, I wouldn't say, or Midsommar. It's just a bit unsettling. That's what it is. It's unsettling and it's quite tense in places. But it doesn't really go bump in the night like other films do. And when you see the trailer, it's a little bit misleading. But of course it has to be. It's selling a movie. But it's a bit misleading in the sense that it's not over the top in that sense. There aren't these crazy bits. It's more about what's going on internally. And once you recognize that, it's more you just feel for it. It's almost like a sad movie as well. But it is genuinely, I enjoyed it. If you go in with that attitude that this isn't Hereditary 2.0, this is something different. It's more of a character study about loneliness, about, you know, connection, and what happens when we drift too far. And the framework of an extreme interpretation of God and religion is what, you know, you find as your refuge. In terms of directing, beautifully shot, beautiful shots in this, and it really is a case of less is more. It really is. And there are some great imagery that you've probably seen in the trailer. The trailer is great, but it does sort of hit all of the big points in the movie. So it's a sort of a spoiler, really, because it's almost like the greatest hits of the movie in 2.5 minutes. But when you watch the movie, you realize how well it's shot. And Rose Glass is a really, really talented director. And it's great because this film, even though it's not, you know, up there with my favourite sort of horror movies or psychological thriller movies. What's great about this movie is it sort of gets me excited for what Rose Glass is going to direct next and what Morpheus Clark's going to make, what she's going to be cast in, because she's such a great actress in this. So it's a sort of great showcase for this amazing upcoming director and this amazing actress. And that's what Saint Maud is to me, as well as being this really nice, contained character study that's disturbing, you know. But it's a great film, and I highly recommend you go out and see it. I'm going to give this movie 4 cups out of 5. 4 cups out of 5. It didn't quite hit the 5 cups because, to me, it didn't quite hit the heights that I might have wanted it to. But I think on repeat viewing, I will enjoy it all the more. And for what it is, for what it tries to do, it does it very, very well. We were discussing it, me and my girlfriend, for a long time after. But it's just not it. But just don't expect Hereditary 2.0 or The Witch. Expect something more on the lines of Taxi Driver or The Joker, in my opinion. But that's it. Okay, please subscribe for more content on video games and movies. Sam's Cup of Tea, signing off. Sam's Cup